we were talking a little bit right before the break of one of the things that, due to the new CFPB Act, that the title companies need to be certified in 7 pillars, which you guys are obviously. So what are those pillars a little bit?
Well, hopefully I'll remember all of them. But one of them is consumer privacy. We have to have procedures in place to protect the consumer's personal information. So we're supposed to work on our desk with one file at a time, lock up the documents in the file cabinets. We have a shred company that comes once a month, and all the paperwork that we have that we don't throw it in the trash can, we put it in these bins that are locked, and then they come and shred it in the parking lot, so that we do the best that we can do to keep that personal information safe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
One of the second things is insurance. We have to make sure that we have our errors and omissions. We also had to purchase cyber insurance now with everything that comes through online. We do have encrypted emails for the personal information that we have to send out. The other issue is escrow accounts. All of our trust accounts are reconciled once a month, and then we have to give copies to both of our title underwriters, and then they monitor, looking for fraud or defalcation.
Mm-hmm.
So those are protected. We make sure all our licenses are in place. So I personally am a licensed title insurance agent. Each branch has to have a title license through the state of Florida. We have to do our continuous education hours every 2 years. So all of those things are in place. We have one of the other pillars was just making sure that we, in the case of a hurricane or some sort of natural disaster, that everything's protected. We have a plan of what's going to happen in those cases. So it's really just good business sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, they absolutely are. And one of the things that you mentioned that I'd like to spend a little bit more time on is the escrow funds, because I know that when we're working with buyers, especially because they're the ones that have to send in the escrow money, and when it comes to then wiring the funds, which how that all works, because the money is obviously a huge part of the transaction. And after probably several years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, it started that people are not able to really use cashier's checks anymore. For the most part, the funds have to be wired.
Right, that's correct. Because what was happening, because for years cashier's checks was just the same as cash, but it was fraud, of course. Eventually someone figured out how they could make a fraudulent cashier's check.
Right.
That they would give to us, and then 3 days later, say we canceled the transaction, we'd wire it to them, and of course there's usually someone not in the United States, they were overseas, and then there was no way for us to go after anyone to get it back. So that's why most title companies and attorneys that do closings do not accept the cashier's checks, because of the fraud.
One of the things that I want to spend a lot of time on is probably the unique things that happen when one side of the contract has a foreign buyer or seller.
At the time of closing, if it's a foreign seller, then we have to do something it's an IRS code. It's called the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act, which protects the buyer in that situation from being responsible for any sort of capital gains that the seller may owe. Normally, what we recognize first that that's the case, that it is a non-U.S. citizen that is not living in the United States, and then they would be responsible. They have to hold back 10% of their sale price, not the proceeds. It's 10% of the gross sales price until IRS determines whether or not there's capital gains due. Because if the buyer purchased that property and that's not done, IRS can put a lien on that house, because there's no way for them to go after a seller that's in another country to get their money.